Mary Lennox had never known a place that felt like home. She had been born in India, in a large house where servants moved quietly through long corridors, always attentive, always distant. Her parents were rarely present, and when they were, they seemed like shadows. Too busy, too important, too far away to notice a small girl with watchful eyes and a silent heart. Mary grew up surrounded by heat and bright sunlight, by voices she did not understand, by rooms that echoed when she walked through them alone. She learned early how to amuse herself, not with laughter or play, but with stillness. She watched, she listened, she waited. Then, one morning, everything changed. Illness swept through the house without warning. The servants whispered behind closed doors. Footsteps hurried where they once drifted. Doors that had always been open were suddenly shut. Mary stayed in her room, unaware of the seriousness of what was happening, until one day no one came to check on her at all. The house grew quiet. Too quiet. Eventually she was discovered, small, thin, and pale, sitting alone with nothing to do and no one to speak to. Not long after, it was decided that she would be sent away, far away, to England, to live with an uncle she had never met. And so, Mary left the only world she had ever known. The journey was long and slow, filled with unfamiliar sights and endless stretches of gray sea. Mary spent much of the time wrapped in blankets, watching the waves rise and fall, as if the ocean itself were breathing. The sound of it became soothing, almost hypnotic, and for the first time, she slept deeply. When she finally arrived in England, the air felt different, cooler, heavier. It carried a dampness she had never known before. The sky was often clouded, and the light seemed softer, quieter, as if it did not wish to disturb anyone. Mary was taken to a place called Misselthwaite Manor. The carriage ride there was long, passing through winding roads and wide open stretches of land. On either side, low hills rolled gently into the distance, covered in rough grass and wild plants. There were no tall buildings, no bustling streets, only silence, broken now and then by the sound of the wind. "This is the moor," the driver said, noticing Mary's curious gaze. The word lingered in her mind. Moor. It sounded old, ancient, like something that had always been there and always would be. At last the carriage slowed and turned through a great iron gate. Beyond it stood Misselthwaite Manor, vast and dark, its many windows watching quietly as Mary approached. Ivy climbed along its stone walls, and the building itself seemed to breathe with age and memory. Mary felt very small as she stepped inside. The halls were long and dim, with thick carpets that softened every footstep. Portraits lined the walls, faces from long ago, eyes following her as she passed. The air smelled faintly of wood, dust, and something else. Something like earth after rain. Mrs. Medlock, the housekeeper, led Mary through a maze of corridors. "Your uncle is not one for visitors," she said firmly. "He keeps to himself, and you must learn to do the same." Mary nodded, though she did not entirely understand. She was shown to a bedroom high up in the house. It was large, with heavy furniture and tall windows that looked out over the moor. A fire burned quietly in the fireplace, casting a gentle glow across the room. For the first time in a long while, Mary felt tired in a way that went deeper than sleep. That night, as she lay in bed, she listened. The wind moved around the house, whispering through cracks and corners. Somewhere far away, a door closed softly. The manor seemed alive, not loudly, but patiently, as if it were waiting. Mary drifted in and out of sleep, wrapped in blankets, her thoughts slowing, her breathing evening out. The days that followed were much the same. Mary explored what little she was allowed to see. Quiet rooms, empty hallways, windows that looked out on endless gray-green land. She was not used to such freedom, yet she did not quite know what to do with it. She walked slowly, often stopping just to listen. One morning, she met a girl named Martha. Martha spoke differently than anyone Mary had ever heard. Her voice was warm and lively, full of rhythm and comfort. She talked as she worked, filling the silence with stories of her family, of the moor, of her mother and brothers and sisters. Mary listened, fascinated. "You ought to be outside more," Martha said cheerfully. "Fresh air does a body good." So, Mary went outside. The garden was wide and open, though much of it seemed forgotten. Paths were overgrown, flower beds untended. Yet even in its stillness, there was a quiet beauty to it. Birds fluttered from branch to branch. Leaves rustled softly in the breeze. Mary walked slowly, her footsteps light on the damp earth. As she wandered, she noticed something strange. A wall. It was covered in ivy, thick and tangled, stretching farther than she could see. There were no openings, no gates, just stone and climbing leaves, as if whatever lay beyond it had been carefully hidden away. Mary felt a small spark of curiosity flicker inside her. "What's behind that wall?" she wondered. The question followed her as she continued walking, lingering in her thoughts long after she returned indoors. That night, as she lay in bed, Mary dreamed. She dreamed of green places and hidden paths, of doors long forgotten and keys waiting patiently to be found. She dreamed of silence that was not lonely, but peaceful. When she woke, the dream stayed with her. Something in misstatement manner was stirring, not loudly, not urgently, but gently, like a seed resting beneath the soil, waiting for the right moment to grow. And though Mary did not yet understand it, her life was slowly, quietly beginning to change. Morning came quietly to Misselthwaite Manor. There were no bells, no sudden sounds, no hurried footsteps in the halls. Instead, pale light slipped gently through the tall windows, resting on the stone walls and wooden floors as if it were unsure whether it was welcome. Mary Lennox woke slowly. For a moment she did not remember where she was. Then she saw the high ceiling, the heavy curtains, the faint glow of daylight beyond the glass, and she knew she was far from the hot, crowded world she had once known. She lay still, listening. The house was awake, but only just. Somewhere below, a door opened and closed softly. The wind moved around the manor again, brushing against it like a familiar companion. Mary dressed and went to the window. Outside, the moor stretched wide and quiet, its colors muted by the early hour. The sky was pale gray, touched with hints of blue. Everything looked calm, still, waiting. She felt an unfamiliar urge to go outside. After breakfast, Mary wandered through the halls until she found her way back to the garden. The air felt cool against her face, and she breathed it in deeply. It was different from the air she had known before. It felt cleaner, slower. She walked along the paths, her steps unhurried. Birds hopped among the branches, pausing to watch her with bright, curious eyes. Leaves stirred gently above her, whispering to one another in a language she did not need to understand. Mary felt for the first time that she was not entirely alone. As she wandered, her thoughts returned to the wall she had seen the day before. The ivy-covered stone had stayed in her mind, quiet but persistent, like a thought that refused to fade. She walked until she found it again. The wall stood just as it had before, tall, old, and covered in thick green ivy. Mary traced her fingers along the rough stone, feeling the coolness beneath the leaves. There was something about it that made her slow down. She followed the wall, step by step, wondering how long it had been there, who had built it, what it protected, or what it hid. The wind stirred, lifting a few loose strands of ivy. For a brief moment, Mary thought she heard something else beneath the sound of the leaves, a faint rustle, like movement on the other side. She paused, but when she listened again, there was only silence. Mary smiled faintly and continued walking. Later that day, she met Martha again. Martha spoke as she worked, her voice steady and comforting, filling the room with gentle sound. "My mother says fresh air makes you hungry," Martha said, "and being outdoors makes you strong." Mary listened quietly. She was not used to such talk. In India, no one had ever spoken to her this way, simply, kindly, without expectation. "Do you like the moor?" Martha asked. Mary thought for a moment. "I think I do," she said slowly. Martha smiled. "It grows on you." That afternoon, Mary went back outside. She walked farther this time, letting her feet choose the path. The garden seemed larger than she had realized, stretching out in gentle curves and hidden corners. Some areas were wild and overgrown. Others felt strangely cared for, as if someone had once loved them deeply. Mary stopped near a small tree, its branches thin but determined, reaching upward despite the cold air. She felt something stir inside her, a quiet curiosity, warm and steady. As she turned away, a sudden movement caught her eye. A bird. It was small and red-breasted, hopping lightly across the ground. It tilted its head, watching Mary with bright interest. Mary stood very still. The bird did not fly away. Instead, it hopped closer, then closer still, as if it were not afraid of her at all. Mary felt her breath slow. She watched as the bird moved along the base of the ivy-covered wall, disappearing briefly behind a cluster of leaves, then reappearing again. Without thinking, Mary followed. The bird led her along the wall until it paused near a place where the ivy grew thickest. It hopped up onto the stone, fluttered its wings once, and then vanished into the branches. Mary stepped closer. Something was different here. The ivy was dense, but beneath it, the stone felt uneven. Mary brushed her hand along the leaves and felt a faint curve beneath her fingers. She pulled gently. The ivy shifted, and there, hidden beneath years of green growth, was the outline of a door. Mary's heart beat a little faster, not with fear, but with wonder. A door. She stepped back, looking around to see if anyone was watching. The garden was empty, silent, patient. Mary knelt and brushed away more ivy, revealing rusty hinges and a handle worn smooth by time. It did not open. Still, she smiled. That evening, as Mary lay in bed, she could think of little else. A door meant a beginning. A door meant something had once been important enough to hide. She imagined what might lie beyond it. Flowers resting beneath the soil, paths waiting to be walked, quiet spaces untouched by time. Her thoughts slowed as sleep returned, gentle and unforced. The next day, Mary woke with a sense of purpose. She went outside as soon as she could, returning to the wall, to the hidden door. The bird was there again, hopping nearby as if it had been waiting for her. Mary smiled at it, feeling a strange sense of gratitude. She explored the area carefully, searching the ground, the nearby stones, the roots of the old trees. And then she saw it. Something small, half buried in the soil, catching the light. She reached down and lifted it gently. A key. It was old and rusted, its surface rough beneath her fingers. Mary turned it over slowly, feeling its weight, its quiet promise. She closed her hand around it. For a long moment, she simply stood there, listening to the wind, the birds, the soft breathing of the garden around her. She did not rush. Some things, she sensed, were meant to be taken slowly. That night, Mary slept more deeply than she had in years. And in her dreams, the garden waited, silent, green, and ready. The morning light returned softly to Misselthwaite Manor. It did not rush. It did not announce itself. It simply appeared, pale and gentle, slipping through the tall windows and resting quietly on the stone walls. Mary Lennox woke with a calm feeling she did not recognize at first. For a moment, she lay still beneath the covers, listening. The house was quiet again, as it always seemed to be in the early hours. Somewhere far below, a faint sound drifted through the halls. Perhaps a door, perhaps footsteps. But it was distant and unimportant. Her thoughts returned, slowly, to the garden, to the wall, to the hidden door, and to the key she had found resting beneath the soil. Mary reached beneath her pillow and felt the small, cool shape in her hand. The metal was cold, but familiar now, as if it had always belonged there. She did not hurry. Some things, she had learned, were better approached gently. After breakfast, Mary wrapped herself in her coat and went outside. The air was cool and fresh, carrying the scent of damp earth and leaves. The sky above the moor was wide and quiet, pale clouds drifting slowly as if they too had nowhere in particular to go. She walked toward the garden, her steps light and unhurried. The ivy-covered wall greeted her like an old friend. The leaves stirred softly as the wind passed through them, whispering in a language made only of movement and sound. Mary stood before the hidden door. For a moment she simply breathed. Then, slowly, she knelt and brushed the ivy aside. The outline of the door emerged again, just as it had the day before. Old hinges, worn wood, a handle shaped by many hands long ago. Mary took the key from her pocket. It fit perfectly. She paused. The garden seemed to hold its breath. Mary turned the key. There was a soft click, not loud, not sudden, just enough to let her know the lock had yielded. She pushed, gently. The door opened. Beyond it lay silence. A narrow path stretched before her, half hidden beneath fallen leaves and thin branches. The air felt different on the other side of the wall. Still cool, but softer somehow, as if it had been waiting quietly for her arrival. Mary stepped through. The secret garden was sleeping. At first glance, it seemed forgotten. The ground was uneven, covered with moss and old leaves. Vines climbed where they pleased, winding themselves around trees and stone alike. Flower beds lay hidden beneath layers of earth, resting patiently. But as Mary walked farther in, she noticed something else: life. Small green shoots pushed gently through the soil. Thin branches carried tiny buds, tightly closed, as if guarding their secrets. Even in its stillness, the garden was not empty. It was resting. Mary moved slowly along the path, careful not to disturb anything. She felt like a guest in a place that had been waiting a very long time for kindness. Birdsong drifted softly above her. Somewhere nearby, the red bird appeared again, hopping lightly from branch to branch, watching her with quiet interest. Mary smiled. She explored the garden gently, her curiosity calm and steady. She touched the rough bark of an old tree, brushed her fingers against leaves cool with morning dew. Each small movement felt important, not because it led anywhere, but because it existed at all. Time passed without her noticing. Eventually, Mary sat down on a low stone bench near the center of the garden. It was worn smooth, softened by years of weather and waiting. She rested her hands in her lap and looked around. The garden felt peaceful, not lonely, not sad, just quiet. Mary realized that she felt the same. For the first time she could remember, her thoughts were not busy. They did not rush or wander. They simply drifted, like clouds across the wide sky of the moor. She stayed there until the air began to cool again, and shadows stretched softly across the ground. Reluctantly, Mary rose and returned to the door. She closed it carefully behind her and replaced the ivy just as she had found it. The wall stood silent once more, guarding its secret. That night, Mary slept deeply. Her dreams were gentle. She dreamed of green places waking slowly, of sunlight resting on leaves, of doors opening without fear. The next day, she returned, and the day after that. Each visit revealed something new, a patch of soil where flowers might once have grown, a tree branch that needed gentle care, a path that could be cleared little by little. Mary did not work hard. She worked patiently. She found a small spade in the shed and began to loosen the earth in one corner of the garden. The soil was dark and rich beneath the surface, warm despite the cool air. It felt alive beneath her hands. As she worked, the red bird watched from nearby, sometimes hopping closer, sometimes flying just out of reach. Mary spoke to it softly, though she was not sure why. It felt natural. One afternoon, as Mary rested, she heard footsteps outside the garden wall. Voices. She froze. For a moment, she worried that her secret would be discovered, but the voices passed by, fading into the distance, unaware of the hidden world resting just beyond the stone. Mary relaxed again. The garden was still safe. As the days passed, something else began to change. Mary herself. Her steps grew lighter, her breathing deeper. The color returned slowly to her cheeks. She felt stronger, not in a way that demanded attention, but in a quiet, steady way that stayed with her. The garden was working on her, and she was working on it. One evening, as the sun sank low and the air cooled, Mary stood once more at the center of the garden. The light fell gently across the leaves, turning them soft and golden. She felt a sense of gratitude she could not explain. Some things, she realized, did not need to be understood. They only needed to be cared for. As she left the garden that night, locking the door behind her, Mary carried its quiet with her. It followed her through the halls of the manor, into her room, and into her sleep. And the garden, now awake in its own slow way, waited patiently for morning. The manor was unusually quiet that morning. It was not the peaceful quiet Mary had grown used to, but something deeper, heavier, as if the house itself were holding its breath. The corridors felt longer, the air more still. Even the wind outside seemed to move more carefully around the stone walls. Mary noticed it as soon as she woke. She lay in bed for a few moments, listening. There were no distant footsteps, no doors opening or closing. Only the faint sound of her own breathing and the soft rustle of the curtains near the window. Something was different. When Mary dressed and stepped into the hallway, she felt it again, that sense of waiting. She walked slowly, her steps light on the thick carpet until she heard voices drifting from below. Quiet voices. Mrs. Medlock was speaking to another servant, her tone low and serious. "He's had a restless night," Mrs. Medlock said. "Best not disturb him today." Mary paused, listening without meaning to. The other servant nodded. "He does that often, doesn't he?" Mrs. Medlock sighed. "Too often." Mary did not know who they were speaking of, but the words followed her as she walked away. He. Someone hidden away, like the garden once had been. Later that morning, Mary went outside. The garden welcomed her as it always did now, the ivy-covered wall opening quietly to let her in. The secret garden was waking more each day. New green shoots pressed upward from the soil, and buds clung tightly to thin branches, holding their promise close. Mary moved through the garden gently, tending to the earth where she could, clearing small paths, brushing leaves aside. The red bird watched from nearby, hopping closer when she knelt, as if curious about her careful hands. She felt calm here, safe. As she worked, her thoughts returned to the voices she had overheard. There was someone else in the manor, someone unseen. Someone kept apart from the rest of the house. Mary wondered what it would be like to live hidden away like that. When the air grew cooler, she returned indoors. That afternoon, Martha came into Mary's room with fresh linens. She moved quietly, but Mary could tell there was something on her mind. "Martha," Mary said softly, "who lives in the West Wing?" Martha paused. "Well," she said slowly, "that would be Master Colin." Mary looked up. "Who is he?" Martha hesitated, then sighed. "He's your cousin, Mr. Craven's son." Mary blinked. She had not known her uncle had a child. "He doesn't come out much," Martha continued. "He's been ill for a long time. Doctors say many things, but none of them seem to help." Mary listened carefully. "Does he ever go outside?" she asked. Martha shook her head. "Hardly ever. He stays in his room, curtains drawn, quiet as the grave some days." The words settled heavily in Mary's chest. That evening, as Mary lay in bed, she thought of Colin, her cousin she had never seen. A boy hidden away in a large house, surrounded by silence and worry. The thought stayed with her as sleep came, slow and gentle. The next day, Mary was wandering through the corridors when she heard it. A sound. At first she thought it was the wind, then she realized it was something else. A soft, distant cry, rising and falling like a wave. Mary stopped. The sound came again. Without quite knowing why, she followed it. She walked slowly down a long hallway, her heart steady, her steps careful. The sound led her to a door at the far end of the West Wing. The door was closed, but light glowed faintly beneath it. Mary hesitated. Then she knocked, very softly. There was silence. Just as she was about to turn away, a voice spoke from inside. "Who is it?" The voice was thin but clear. "It's Mary," she said. "Mary Lennox." There was a pause. "You may come in," the voice said at last. Mary opened the door. The room was dim, curtains drawn tightly against the light. The air smelled faintly of medicine and old fabric. On the bed lay a boy with pale skin and dark eyes, watching her carefully. "You are my cousin," he said. "Yes," Mary replied. For a moment they simply looked at one another. Colin's eyes were sharp, curious, and tired all at once. "You don't look afraid," he said. "I'm not," Mary answered honestly. Colin seemed surprised. Most people, Mary thought, were afraid of things they did not understand. She had grown used to quiet and waiting. This room felt no stranger than the empty halls she had first explored. Colin shifted slightly. "Everyone whispers around here," he said. "They think I don't hear." Mary said nothing. "They think I will never be well," Colin continued. "That I will always stay here." Mary remembered the garden. "Things can change," she said softly. Colin frowned. "How would you know?" Mary thought for a moment. "I found something once," she said. "Something hidden. Everyone thought it was gone." Colin watched her closely. "And was it?" he asked. "No," Mary said. "It was just waiting." The room grew quiet. Colin lay back against his pillows, his breathing slowing. "You may come again," he said after a while. "If you like." Mary nodded. As she left the room, she felt something shift, not loudly, not suddenly, but gently. Like the garden, something else was beginning to wake. That night, Mary slept deeply. She dreamed of doors opening, not just in walls, but in people. Of light slipping into dark places, slow and patient. And somewhere in the manor, behind drawn curtains, a boy lay awake a little less afraid than he had been before. The days that followed passed gently at Misselthwaite Manor. Nothing seemed hurried anymore. The house remained quiet, but the quiet had changed. It was no longer heavy or watchful. It felt softer, as if the walls themselves had begun to relax. Mary noticed it most in the mornings. She woke with ease now, her thoughts clear and untroubled. The air in her room felt lighter, and the pale daylight that entered through the windows no longer seemed distant or cold. It rested warmly on the walls, lingering as if it wished to stay. Mary dressed slowly and went about her day without rush. She still visited the garden each morning, tending to the earth with patient hands. The plants were changing now. Buds had grown fuller, leaves had widened. The soil, once still and quiet, responded to her care. The garden was listening, and so was Mary. One afternoon, as she returned from the garden, Mary paused near the west wing. She had not planned to go there. Her feet simply slowed, as if they remembered the path on their own. She stood for a moment outside Colin's door. The hallway was empty. Mary knocked softly. There was silence at first. Then a voice, calmer than before, answered. "You may come in." Mary entered. The room was much the same, curtains drawn, soft shadows resting in the corners, but something was different. The air did not feel as heavy. Colin lay propped against his pillows, watching the light move faintly along the wall. "You came back," he said. "Yes," Mary replied. "I said I would." Colin considered this quietly. He was not used to promises being kept without question. "Tell me something," he said, after a moment. "What do you do when you go outside?" Mary thought carefully. "I walk," she said. "I listen. I breathe." Colin frowned slightly. "That doesn't sound very important." Mary smiled faintly. "It is." Colin did not argue. He seemed tired but not restless. His breathing was slow, almost thoughtful. "Everyone tells me I must be careful," he said, "that the world outside is too much." Mary looked at the closed curtains. "It's very quiet outside," she said, "quieter than in here." Colin was silent for a long time. "Do you think," he asked softly, "that I could ever go outside?" Mary did not answer right away. "Yes," she said at last, "but not all at once." Colin nodded. That made sense to him. The next day, Mary brought something with her when she came to Colin's room. She carried a small bundle of leaves and soil wrapped carefully in cloth. She placed it gently on the table near his bed. "What is that?" Colin asked. "From the garden," Mary said. Colin hesitated. Is it safe? Mary nodded. It's quiet. Colin reached out slowly and touched the cloth. His fingers brushed against the cool earth beneath. It smells different, he said. It smells alive, Mary answered. Colin closed his eyes for a moment, breathing deeply. Nothing happened. And that was exactly what made it important. From that day on, Mary visited Colin each afternoon. Sometimes they spoke, sometimes they did not. Mary would sit near the window, describing the garden in slow, careful words. She told him of the red bird, of the new shoots pushing through the soil, of the sunlight resting gently on the leaves. Colin listened. He asked questions, quiet ones. Does it hurt the plants when you touch them? No. Do they mind being alone? No. Do they change slowly? Yes. Colin liked that. One afternoon, Mary noticed that the curtains had been opened just a little. A narrow strip of light reached across the floor. Colin followed her gaze. I asked them to, he said. Just a little. Mary said nothing, but her smile was warm. That evening, Mary returned to the garden and sat quietly on the stone bench. The red bird hopped nearby, watching her with bright eyes. I think he's ready, Mary whispered. The bird tilted its head. The next morning, Mary found a small chair waiting outside Colin's door. Mrs. Medlock stood nearby, uncertain but curious. He wanted it there, she said quietly. Mary nodded. Later that day, with careful steps and patient pauses, Colin was moved closer to the open air. He sat wrapped in blankets, his breathing slow but steady. The door to the garden was still far away, but the window was open. Fresh air drifted in. Colin closed his eyes. It's cold, he said. Yes, Mary replied. But it's kind. Colin stayed there only a few minutes. That was enough. That night, the manor slept deeply. The wind moved freely through open spaces. The walls no longer felt so tight. Somewhere in the garden, leaves stirred softly beneath the moonlight. And in his room, Colin dreamed, not of sickness or fear, but of a quiet place beyond a wall, waiting patiently for him. Morning arrived gently at Misselthwaite Manor. It came with pale light and quiet air, with no rush and no sound to announce it. The house seemed to accept the day calmly, as if it had learned at last how to breathe. Mary woke feeling rested. She lay for a moment, listening to the soft movement of the curtains and the distant hush of the wind across the moor. Her thoughts turned, as they often did now, to the garden and to Colin. She dressed and went about her morning slowly, letting the day unfold without hurry. Outside, the garden was waiting. The soil was dark and soft beneath her fingers. Leaves stirred gently above her, and the red bird appeared again, hopping nearby with quiet curiosity. Mary worked patiently, clearing a small path, loosening the earth, welcoming the new growth that had begun to show itself more boldly now. Everything was changing, slowly, naturally. Later that morning, Mary returned to the manor and made her way to the west wing. Colin's door stood closed, but light shone beneath it. Mary knocked softly. "Come in," Colin's voice answered. Mary stepped inside. The curtains were open a little wider than before. A soft stripe of daylight crossed the floor and rested against the far wall. Colin lay propped up among his pillows, his eyes following the light as if it were something new. "You opened the curtains," Mary said. "Yes," Colin replied. "Just a little more?" Mary nodded. They sat quietly for a moment, neither of them speaking. The room felt different now, not heavy, not tight. It felt like a place that had begun to trust the air around it. "Do you think," Colin said at last, "that today might be a good day?" Mary considered him carefully. "Yes," she said, "a gentle one." Colin seemed satisfied with that. A short time later, Mrs. Medlock entered the room, her expression cautious but not unkind. She carried folded blankets and paused when she saw Mary there. "He's been asking," Mrs. Medlock said quietly, "about the garden." Mary did not speak, but her eyes met Colin's. "Only to the door," Colin said quickly. "Only for a moment." Mrs. Medlock hesitated, then sighed softly. "Very well," she said, "but we will go slowly." Slowly was something they all understood now. Colin was wrapped carefully in blankets and helped into a chair with wheels. He held himself very still, his hands folded in his lap, his breathing measured and calm. The corridor felt long, but it was quiet. Each turn brought them closer to the fresh air waiting beyond the door. When the door to the outside opened, a cool breeze drifted in. Colin closed his eyes. The air touched his face gently. It did not rush. It did not demand anything. It simply arrived. They stopped just outside the door. "That's far enough," Mrs. Medlock said. Colin nodded. He did not ask for more. Mary stood beside him, saying nothing. The garden lay beyond, unseen but present. The sound of leaves, the distant birdsong, the quiet movement of the world reached them softly. Colin breathed in slowly. "I thought it would hurt," he said. "It doesn't," Mary replied. They stayed there only a few minutes. Then, just as gently, they returned inside. That afternoon, Colin slept. His rest was deep and undisturbed, and when he woke, his eyes were clearer than Mary had ever seen them. The next day they went a little farther, not to the garden yet, but closer. Each day the distance shortened. Each day Colin's breathing grew steadier. The fear he had carried so long began to loosen its grip, not all at once, but enough. Mary spoke to him of the garden in careful words. "The plants don't hurry," she said. "They grow when they're ready." Colin liked that. One morning, as the sky cleared and the air warmed just slightly, Mary brought the chair herself to Colin's room. "Today," she said, "we can try." Colin looked at her. "To the garden?" he asked. "Yes," Mary said, just inside." They moved slowly along the path Mary had cleared. The ivy-covered wall stood quietly, familiar now, no longer a mystery, but a promise. Mary unlocked the door. It opened without sound. The garden greeted them with stillness. Colin's eyes widened as he took it in. The green, the light, the gentle movement of leaves. He said nothing at first. He simply looked. Mary guided the chair forward, just a little. The air inside the garden felt warmer, kinder. Birds fluttered overhead. The red bird appeared again, hopping close, unafraid. Colin watched it. "It's real," he whispered. "Yes," Mary said, "it's been waiting." They stopped near the stone bench. Colin reached out and touched the armrest of the chair, grounding himself in the moment. The garden did not rush him. It accepted him as he was. Colin breathed deeply. For the first time, the world outside his room felt possible. They did not stay long. A few minutes was enough. As they left, Colin looked back once more at the garden, at the light resting gently on the leaves. "I'll come again," he said. The garden, silent and patient, seemed to agree. That night, the manor slept with open windows. The wind moved freely through the halls, carrying with it the scent of earth and leaves. Somewhere, a bird settled into rest, and in his dreams Colin walked, not far, not fast, but freely, beneath the open sky of a place that had been waiting just for him.